What's up, Wizards? It's Dev. From SBMTG, you know by now all the things that I usually say at the beginning of a video. Well, I've already put out a spoiler video today, but like right after I got it out, Wizards spoiled like 5 more cards. So I want to go ahead and run through these real quick so we can kind of get ahead of it tomorrow and not have to talk about 25 cards. Plus, there is some good stuff in here. There's some limited playable things like Archway Angels. This is just 6 mana, 5 and a white for a 3/4 angel with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 life for each gate you control. So in limited, if you have a gate or 2, this can gain you a couple life and be a decent flyer on board, but it does cost an awful lot. That said, it's splashable, easy to play no matter, what other colors you're playing. I like that about it, and if you happen to have like 3 gates for whatever reason, this is actually a pretty decent card. But that's kind of a big ask. Even in the standard gates deck, the kind of budget thing, I don't think this really ends up making the cut. But it's a fine limited card. And so is Cult Guild Mage, which I actually, if you're just building a budget spectacle deck for standard or something, I think this might actually have its place. And it's also, like, the best art ever. I thought it was Mega Man at first. It turns out it's Jace, which is even better. But it's just a black and a red for a 2/2 human shaman, and you can pay 3 and a black and tap it to have target player discard a card. You can only do that when you can activate a sorcery. Or you can pay a red and tap it to have it deal 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So this is an early game, reliable, easy source of spectacle triggers. That is great, especially in limited, where it's going to be really important to pick up spectacle triggers if you have more than just a couple of spectacle cards in your deck. If you're trying to build a whole limited deck in draft based around spectacle, you probably need a guy like this because he's just a reliable trigger every turn. And the ability to make somebody discard a card on a stick every turn is actually freaking fantastic too, especially in long games like Sealed. So I like a lot about this in the limited environment. I'm all for Guild Mages period, but this one looks especially strong, again, especially if you're trying to make some kind of spectacle deck. But even if you're not, just the ability to, stall out the game and deal a damage at a time is sometimes going to make a difference. So there's just so much about this guy that I like. Now, rough translation coming up for this one, but so far we've got Audition, Audacity. Now, Audition is basically a nameless inversion, just red, black for an instant. Target creature gets +3/-3 till end of turn. And Audacity is 6 mana. I don't know how they had the audacity to print something that kind of looks this mediocre on the second half, but it is 6 mana for an instant, which I think is important. Destroy target non-basic land, and it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Now, that is an awful lot of mana to destroy a non-basic land. But again, it is instant speed. You don't see instant speed land destruction too much, so it might be noteworthy. Aside from that, though, this in the very, very late game can very occasionally help pick off like a Search for Kanta or an Adonto the First Ford or something, a treasure map that's turned over into Treasure Cove or something. So there are things that can be done with the second half, but really I just like to look at this, and this card is already catching a lot of crap in like the hour that it's been out. But I'd say it's not too terrible just because the first half is playable enough. I'm not sure if you play this or like Moment of Craving or some other 2 mana black removal piece. A lot of people have switched over from Cast Down to Moment, but you still play Cast Down in a lot of decks because it takes out like Wild Growth Walker, a couple of other creatures. This does the same thing. This can take out Wild Growth Walker, but it has a little bit of utility against control decks in that it can't kill a creature, but it can kill Search for Kanta. So I kind of like the flexibility on the card, and if nothing else, again, I started to explain this earlier, but then kind of trailed off. I think it's a good enough card to play, and it's better than everybody says it is, just because it's a playable piece of removal at instant speed that can take out a lot of stuff and act as a pump spell every now and again if you have a big enough creature, which is worth pointing out. But it also has, it's stapled onto a card that you probably won't play too often, but in the right situations, it's a fine card. So I'm not really even evaluating the second half of the card that much. It's just that the first half is kind of playable in its own right. And it's, again, stapled to something that you won't play in, 9 out of 10 games. And when you do, it'll be important. So I actually don't hate this card. Up next is Emulation Shaman. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 1/3 Viashino Shaman, and whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a mana ability, Emulation Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. And you can pump 5 mana into it, 3 and 2 red, to have it get +3/+3 and gain menace until end of turn, so you get a 4/6 menace if you pump 5 mana into it, which isn't terrible. This is half mentor, is what I call it. It's not quite harsh mentor, and I'd say the number one comment that I've seen seen in, again, the hours since this card has been spoiled, is that like Harsh Mentor didn't see any play, so neither will this. But I think it's really, really dependent on the standard environment that you're in. You know, I don't think this hoses like adapt that much. Like they'll just shrug off 1 damage. It is a spectacle trigger, so that really matters. But they can, most decks can shrug off this 1 damage at a time. What I'm worried about is Aristocrats. If Aristocrats is a real deck in this format, and they're just using like Pitiless Pontiff as their sack outlet, but if they do get a free sack outlet, especially, then this would be a really big beating to a deck like that. So it's possible that this is just a sideboard piece if the right deck comes along that is mostly made up of, you know, 1 or 2 big turns worth of activated abilities and triggers and stuff. This deck could, this card could really help stop it in its tracks. And I don't think, by the way, that, you know, the 5 mana +3/+3 in Menace is like reminder text or flavor text. You know, I think that's actually relevant. I've always liked 2-drops to get better in the late game, and this definitely does that, while also, you know, adding a ping here or there and triggering spectacles. So it could be a better card again than people are you know, making it out to be. It just really depends on the meta that we're going into and what else we see in this set. But actually, the card that made me jump on here and do this the whole video was Winged Salamander, the Bubble Butt. This thing is just 1 blue mana for a 1/1 Salamander Drake. That's cool creature type. It's got flying, and you can pay 7 and a blue to adapt 4, but the ability costs 1 less for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard, and that is nuts. This is a 1 mana 1/1 flying, or a 2 mana 5/5 flying. some of the time, that's insane. But, you know, in the mid game, even if you have to pay like 3 or 4 mana to adapt this into a 5/5, sometimes you'll totally do that. And you can adapt as an instant, so you can just have this threat of activation is insane sometimes on this card when your opponent's trying to swing in or something. You can do it at the end of your opponent's turn if you've got extra mana. And again, just like 3 or 4 instants in the graveyard, if you've got leftover mana, boom, you can do it. So I really, really like this guy, and I think that he's going to be fine in the right deck. You know, I'm not sure that Drake's actually plays this guy, even though he's a Drake. It's not like it's a Drake tribal deck for real, but, you know, that deck needs room for like 20 to 24 instants and sorceries, anywhere really between 22 and 24. And I'm just not sure it can fit a creature like this alongside the Drakes and the Electromancers and the occasional Niv-Mizzet, so I'm not really sure that it goes there, and it probably doesn't go in mono blue tempo, even though that deck is pretty spell heavy. I still don't think it necessarily plays enough to really, really want something like this over an option like Siren Stormtamer that can protect creatures and is much better as far as tempo goes. So I'm not really sure what wants this, but I'm sure something does, and it can be very, very easy to build something around this. This probably goes at least well in like blue-black Surveil. Get a bunch of cards in your graveyard. And note that this doesn't work like, you know, Delve or anything. You don't have to remove the instants or sorceries. They stay in your graveyard. So that seems really good. Like, it's a possible control win condition, right? Like, in the very late game, you play this as a 2 mana for 5/5 in control. So there's just a lot of applications here, whether it's aggro or even, again, possibly as a super, super cheap control finisher in the very late game. They're trying to activate Azcanta anyway. And same thing with Drake decks. If they can fit this, they're trying to put instants and sorcery in the graveyard anyway. So it's entirely possible this has 3 or 4 homes or 0 homes. We'll have to really wait and see whether it's worth the slot in some decks, but I think it's going to be worth building something around this anyway. It's not like it's Delver or Gurmag Angler, but it is in some ways the best of both worlds. I like a lot about this card, and again, it's the whole reason that I was excited and had to hop back on here and get on the mic and talk to you about these cards, because this, I think, has easily the greatest chance of pretty much any card that we've seen in these 5 cards, but maybe even today. Like, it's obvious that Domri and the 4 mana Wrath are really good. Even the 3 mana Rakdos enchantment that's like an Experimental Frenzy kind, that's what everyone's, you know, comparing it to. Those are easily the best cards of the day, but I think this is in the conversation. That really shows you how good this is. Loving the uncommons in this set so far. But I may have spoken too soon. I've just reloaded Mythic Spoiler, and we have got Warrant Warden. I am reading this with you guys for the very first time. I have never actually looked at this card. Warrant is 2 hybrid blue and white mana. Put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. That's pretty good. And Warden is 3, a white and a blue for a sorcery. Create a 4/4 white and blue Sphinx creature token with flying and vigilance. Okay, so it's kind of an addendum card, isn't it? You know, sorcery is or Warden is a sorcery. So it's not going to be very often that you want to pay 5 mana in these Azorius decks for a creature. But it is really cool that it's effectively a creature stapled onto removal. Or the opposite of that, removal stapled onto a creature. And actually, time has proven before that the ability to put something on top of its owner's library is super annoying and way better than it sounds, you know? I probably shouldn't go so far as to call it removal, because it's just tempo in a way. But this ability is much better than it looks pretty much every time it's printed. You know, things like Time Ebb even have seen very, very, very sparing standard play, but there's been a few times that these effects have been desirable, but usually they're way overcosted. But this is really aggressively costed, just 2 mana, really easy to cast, and it's fantastic. Tempo. The second half, again, is a sorcery, but if you've got, I don't know, Wilderness Reclamation, you might want this. I'm just not sure that it's the right piece for the Bant control deck, but it might be. It might be. It's great tempo. It allows you to stall until you get your Wilderness Reclamation down, and once you do have Reclamation down, and you can, you know, pretty guilt-free cast the second half. But that, again, I'm not sure that deck has room for cards like this. It all kind of depends. And again, this is my first time evaluating the card, so I will say that when you're, you know, ready to turn the corner, the creature is good, but there's way better options at the 5 mana slot. And as far as removal goes, there's probably just better options at the 2 mana slot. So I'm talking myself out of it, but as far as, like, you know, versatility on a card, this has an awful lot of it, and it's really, really good and limited for what it's worth. But I think we're all wanting these standard, these rare split cards to be really good, and people were disappointed by the Rakdos one, and I bet people will probably be disappointed by this. But again, there's a lot of versatility here. I'm just not quite sure that this, you know, fits over some other stuff you could be playing in the Bant control deck or the Blue-White X control deck for that matter. Like I said, that's all the cards. Not going to belabor the point too much. Just do all the YouTube stuff. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't done it yet. Check out the link to TCG Player in the bottom, the description box down there. Just to pre-order any of this or sealed product, whatever you want to do. It just helps me out when you click the link, so do that. Consider joining the Patreon if you've been enjoying spoiler season up to this far and you want to see the channel grow and get better and all that. You can be a part of that for just $1 a month, and it really helps me out. But aside from that, sorry there's no Ziggy in this video. I just wanted to kind of kick it out as quickly as I possibly could, so it's just me and a microphone. But I'm pretty sure I'm done for now, so I will catch you guys tomorrow evening sometime with Tuesday's spoilers. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.